We are excited about this topic, advocacy through assessment, because we know that both advocacy and assessment are so critically important to the work that we're doing with arts integration in our schools, in our community settings. Tonight we have some great people with us. First, I'd like to introduce to you John Letelier, who is the Fine Arts Specialist with the Florida Department of Education. And John just joined the Florida Department recently, and we are delighted to have him at the helm of arts education in our state. John has a piano degree from the University of Tennessee. He went on for graduate studies at the Juilliard School, and then he came back to Florida, or he came to Florida, where at the Miami University he received a master's in chamber music and accompanying. He has been an active teacher for over 15 years, and he has taught at all levels from elementary school all the way through college. In 2010, he was named Marion County Teacher of the Year. So we know that those 15 years allowed him to really develop his skills as a teacher. John also has served on the Public Education Foundation Board in Marion County, as well as on Florida's Student Growth Implementation Committee in 2011. I'd like to tell you that all three of our panelists this evening have experiences both in education and in community settings. And this combination really helps us to bring home what we're trying to present in these webinars. The idea of being a complete participant in the education scene by being involved both in our schools and in our communities. Dr. Tom Pearson is no exception to that idea. He is the Fine Arts Administrator for the School District of Palm Beach County. He started his career as a band director, a high school band director, and he became the Magnet and Choice Program Coordinator for the Palm Beach County Schools before he moved into his current position as Arts Education Administrator for the school district. He's the past president of the Florida Music Supervisors. He is on the education committee of various community arts organizations, including the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts, as well as the Norton Museum of Art. He is an adjunct professor at Palm Beach State College and at Nova Southeastern University. Tom is also president of the FAAE Board of Directors. And Susan Rossoff is another of our great guests this evening. She is an arts integration specialist, and she's an arts and museum consultant. Susan served as curator of education at the Orlando Museum of Art and was the first curator in the state to link the museum education materials to the Florida Sunshine State Standards. She has developed interdisciplinary curriculum materials for museum collections and exhibitions. She was the project director for Learning Florida History through the murals of Christopher Still, and also for Exploring Uncle Monday and Other Florida Folk Tales. Both of these projects were projects of the Florida Alliance. She also was co-director of Learning Through the Arts and Technology. So you can see she has a breadth of experience that's statewide as well. She's a frequent speaker for teachers and museum educators, and she has done extensive work with Mary Palmer and Associates in the field of arts integration. Susan is adjunct professor at the University of Central Florida. So you can see that we've got great guests who are ready to share some of their thoughts with us. I'd like to have us tonight start with the end in mind. So, question to you, a point to ponder, but we're very interested in your response. Why are you providing an arts integrated learning experience as a teaching experience? What do you think this is going to do? Why does it matter? Experience. What do you think this is going to do? Why does it matter? Seeing that some of you are able to get through, and some of you say you're providing an arts integrated learning experience because it engages the students actively in the learning process. Someone else says You're providing that arts integrated learning experience because it allows your students to see a more holistic view of their life at school. That's great. I think some of you are having a little trouble giving us your responses, but let's go on to just one more question here. What do you hope you can accomplish by providing these arts integrated learning experiences? I see that some of you are talking about the idea that you hope to enrich the students' learning so that they are more excited about coming to school. Some of you are talking about through your arts integrated lessons, you're helping to achieve the standards that students are addressing in their other subject areas. These are all important reasons. Well, now we're going to think about that end goal. What is it that we want to have happen by looking at Florida's Next Generation Sunshine State Standards? And the whole idea of the Sunshine State Standards is to provide standard-based experiences for Florida students. And John Letelier is going to talk with us about these standards and what that really means to us. So John, welcome. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Wonderful. Okay, so everybody's seeing that now, right?
Okay.
Okay. So the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards, as you can see, they are brand new benchmarks, and they are different from the old standards that we used to have. And one of the ways is that they're meant to provide rigorous instruction as assessments that you can see, and they also provide associated access points for students with severe cognitive disabilities, which you can read on the screen there. A couple of items of interest. First of all, there's no crosswalk from the old standards to the new because they're so different. And they should be used, for those of you that are teachers, they definitely should be used next school year fully, the exception of that are daggered, which means a course that's scheduled for deletion. Those courses that are still available next year for use, then those would actually link to the old standards, just like you have in the course description. But any new courses that we have completely linked with the Next Generation State Standards. Okay, so I'm not sure if we heard everything that I said, but basically if you look at the first slide and just keep in mind that these new standards should be used for next school year full implementation, except for those courses that you sign your students up for that are daggered, which means that they're still there for next year, but they're scheduled for deletion for the consequent year. Okay, if you could turn to the next slide, please. Okay, I want to provide a quick framework there for everybody, so you can, although there's no crosswalk between the old standards and the new ones, it at least gives you an idea of how to get your head around it and think, which is that now we have big ideas that are similar to where we used to have strands. You have enduring understandings, which are similar to the standards we used to have. And then we have benchmarks, which are the same. And you can read there on the slide. I don't need to read it for you. You have basically a broad level, a medium level, and then a very intimate view of what's being asked for and assessed. And the benchmarks, one noticeable item I would say is the fact that the benchmark itself is measurable, and I wrote that there for you, and that's an important distinction. That's what you would use to make your assessments and that you would evaluate from. Okay, features, and this will help you with just how they're different from the old standards. The new standards, as you can see, are more focused upon higher order thinking skills. They ask the what, the why, the how of things, analytical questions. And this is very different from the older standards in many ways, but most of what you'll see is there's a progression going from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. You'll actually see as the grades progress, you'll see that the question becomes more in depth. And so no longer is it just looking at the fundamental, but it's exploring that fundamental further for each benchmark as you progress through. basically what these standards will do is it takes into account what you're already doing as an educator, and then it's just making sure that you're really looking more in depth to see what you can improve upon and really help the student to have as much growth as possible at their potential allows. Okay, turn to the next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Another significant difference with these benchmarks is you'll notice now that there's access points, and this is really great because the access points give you somewhere to look for students that have significant cognitive disabilities, and these are actually embedded in the standards now, and there's 3 levels of complexity that I think are pretty self-explanatory: participatory, supported, and independent, with the participatory obviously being the least complex. And they are embedded in these Next Generation Sunshine State standards. And just to give you an example, if you were to look at one, which you don't have to write down because it's actually the next slide, that particular benchmark, if you were to look at one of the access points and you look under participatory, the actual benchmark says develop effective listening strategies and describe how they can support appreciation of musical works. That's 1.1. And if you look down at, you don't have this on your screen, but 1.4, for example, says to identify and describe the 4 primary voice parts, such as soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. If you go to the participatory of that, it says distinguish between 2 voice types. So that'll give you an idea of just how it's broken down to help with that area. Okay, now keep the slide right where it was. Thank you. This will help you to just explain how these are laid out. So it's really easy to look at. The 2 letters, as it says, are the content area. The first number is the grade level. So if that said MUK, that would be kindergarten. MU1 would be first grade, obviously. Then the next letter indicates the big idea. And after that, you have the enduring understanding, and finally the benchmark. Keeping in mind, if you were to look at the C11 of that, the C being the big idea, that's your general broad scope, enduring understanding being the medium, and the benchmark being your more focused objective. That's measured. Okay, if you can turn to the next, please. Okay, and this, you can just have this for your reference, just to look at just what I said, but it gives you a clear picture that you can break it apart with. All right, the next slide, the CPOMs here. This is where all of our standards are at. For those of you that might not know, if you go to artiststandards.org, you can find all of our standards. You can view them individually, or you can view them as a whole. What I've listed here is the easiest way, I think, to attack them, which is you download and print all the standards. And if you just go to there and then click on the tabs, like I've said, you can scroll down to any of the content areas you would like. You can do math or science, and you can download that to Word or open print view and then print it from there. And that'll give you all of your next generation standards together for that subject area. That might be of value to you also for the other areas as you're looking at cross-curricular work. And you'll see, as I said, all those content areas there. On the next page, you'll see where it says cross-curricular standards. In each course description, you will see that it, first of all, aligns with the Next Generation Sunshine State standards. So all the art standards are new. And then they also contain standards from other content areas. These are areas that must be covered. And there's 2 areas that you would see there. One would be the Next Generation standards from other areas, and 2 would be the Common Core. The Common Core is math and language arts, and I'll talk about those briefly in the next minute. And then the Next Generation Sunshine State standards would be other areas you would see, such as dance or physical education, and you'll actually see those at the bottom of the course descriptions. So at first you would see all the standards for, let's say you're doing a music course, you'd see all the regular music standards, and then at the bottom you would see the cross-curricular standards. Okay, Finally, I have provided an example of both the Next Generation Sunshine State Standard and a Common Core standard that you can look to align with. And in this example, we're using MJ, which means middle school / junior, feeder 2. And you can see, if you were to look at the course description, you would see that at the bottom there would be this number, LACC.7.RL.2.5. And what that says is compare and contrast a story, drama, or poem to its audio, film, staged, or multimedia version, analyzing the effects of techniques unique to each medium, and you can read the rest there. What I put there is you could use that in conjunction with the theater benchmark, which says compare a film version of a story to its original play form. Or you could use it independently of itself, because you can see how that particular language arts standard actually does align quite a bit to what you would be doing in theater. Now, just to help you break apart the Common Core and what it looks like, because this is new how it's actually put together, and these are Florida numbers that you would see in CPOMs. LA means language arts, CC is Common Core, 7th is 7th grade, RL is reading literacy, and then literature, excuse me, and then 2 is a section, and then 5 is the actual standard. So it's very easy if you're looking at the document, the Common Core document itself, to put that together, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood how to just go about looking at it. And then if you look, another example that we have is the elementary intermediate 2. This is what would be 4th grade. Now, instead of how you used to have kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, the 3rd through 5th are called intermediate courses. So intermediate 1 will be 3rd grade, intermediate 2 is 4th, and intermediate 3 is 5th. It includes the following science benchmark in it. And this is just an example. There's PE, there's all sorts of different benchmarks you'll see. SC4P10.3, and this has to do with vibration and sound waves, which is studied in 4th grade. So this is very applicable to music, and you would want to take and identify the connections, as it says with the music standard there, music benchmark. You want to identify those connections together within those 2 standards, benchmarks. And you would want to take and look at the possibility of working with the teachers that are in the core areas to actually maybe see if you can correlate the timing of when those things are taught. Another thing that I will say is that all of the benchmarks and standards that are cross-curricular are very applicable to the discipline that you would have, be it music or art or dance or drama. So they're well thought out, and I think that you'll find that they will relate very well and help you to further the learning growth of your students.
Excellent, John. Thank you so much for sharing this very important information about how we will be managing our work for the next years ahead. So now, does anyone have a question that we might pose for John at this time?
Thank you, and I enjoyed hearing your biography. It was wonderful. I spent this weekend trying to go through these standards, and I'm a little confused about, I have a subject area, a content area standard, and a music standard for an arts integration project, and then I'm being asked for a Common Core standard. So is that the big idea standard, or is that?
So you're being asked to put a Common Core standard in there?
Yes.
Okay. Any of the Common Core standards that will be in the courses, you will actually see coming up because they're just being put in now. So okay. Those would be something that I don't think, Katrina, if I'm correct, that they would not be seeing at this moment.
No.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. I thought I was missing something. Okay, thank you so much. It's a pleasure listening to you.
No. And once those are put into the course descriptions, then you'll be able to actually pull them up and view which Common Core standards actually go right along with that particular course.
I understand. Well, it's been fascinating. I love the way it's set up. It really helped.
Great. Well, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to John? John, thank you again. We really appreciated having you with us tonight. And now we're going to go on to the advocacy question. We're thinking about those end goals, but we want to build support for arts education. And we want to think a little bit about what matters. A little earlier, I asked you to think about what matters to yourself, but we're going to ask our special panelists, Tom Pearson, who you didn't get to see earlier in my slide that wasn't showing to you. There's Tom Pearson, and on your right is Susan Rossoff. So Tom, in building support for arts education, what matters? What do we as the teaching artists or teachers or school administrators need to really get out there so that we can make our work important?
That we probably have to look at is keeping the end in mind as the end result. And what superintendents look at, what test coordinators look at, all the things that people look at in our school district, as well as the general public wants to know what we're doing for accountability. And it's not that we ever want to hang our hat in the arts on test scores and try to justify what we do in the arts with test scores, but we kind of have to coexist with the other academic and discipline worlds to show the ties, and it's a lot of times it's about connecting the dots and showing how most always the arts are related to some subject area. So I think assessment is something that's one of those things that we have to do and coexist in the world of data. And so it's really important that we are able to show some kind of not only the quantitative but the qualitative as well as when we're evaluating our programs and when we're showing those connections and what success we have with not only in the arts areas, but also show how that we can help support forward and connect the dots for students and show all of the differentiated learning styles that we use in the arts to be able to help students succeed.
It's FCAT week, and so we know that, and particularly this week, people are concerned about real learning and not fluff in the arts. And so I think so often people don't understand that learning actually happens in the art, bona fide learning. And I have a wonderful example of one teacher who I was working with, and she was teaching our 5th grade class about cell structure. And in the testing, the students did very poorly. And so she decided to take another approach, and she had them work in small groups through dance to show what cell structure was like and how those cells changed. And then in the retest, the results were very much better. So by approaching learning from another point of view and really zeroing in on what the difficulty was, she was able to be successful through the arts.
And so, Susan, in what you're saying, you're really saying that when the teacher and the teaching artist, or the community agent and the teaching artist, collaborate so that it's the goals, the end goals are really very clear to both, that the arts integrated learning can really approach those goals. Is that right?
Absolutely right. And I think we know that students learn in so many different ways, that the teaching artist is really able to help identify different strategies for movement or listening or looking that the teacher, the classroom teacher, may not be familiar with or may not have used yet. And so that's one of the great advantages of partnering and collaborating.
Exactly. Very, very important. And we know that today's students are all different. This 21st century learner that we're addressing is really a unique animal that each one kind of has their own individual learning needs. And as we think about building support for arts education, one of the reasons that arts education and arts integration is so important is that it reaches the needs of those varied learners. And so the kinesthetic learner can really understand through dance, and the oral learning might really be able to understand through the music experiences that they have. So yes, some different ways of learning for our students is one of the other reasons that arts education matters and can help us to build support for that. Yeah, good. Anything else, Susan?
Well, I think that the emphasis that we are seeing on 21st century learning is moving away from the lecture mode, certainly from pencil and paper kinds of learning, and the arts is a wonderful vehicle to accomplish those new critical thinking kinds of lessons.
Good. Good, thank you. Well, now I would like this photo. There are kids who are depicting through a tableau, so through a drama experience. They're depicting scenes from a story that they're reading in their class, The Great Kapok Tree. And so they're using the drama strategy of tableau to summarize the story content. And then they also used creative movement to lead them into their tableau and to show their understanding of the story sequence and what was happening in the story. Now, are you able to? A student in 5th grade has created collage images to show her view of the characters in the story that she is studying. And so she has the variety of characters that she has taken from magazine photos and put them together in a collage. This led to the creation of a 5-paragraph summary writing about the story. Are you able to see my slide now?
We've got it now.
Okay. I hope that you can see this slide of the process. I showed you a couple products, or tried to, and now I'm
This is showing.
Oh, I'm showing you a process photo. The children in 2nd grade are studying their October Artist of the Month, Diego Rivera, and they are looking at this image using the read the picture strategy to identify what the author's purpose or the artist's purpose was, and to look at the supporting details that they find in this painting to bring it all to their attention. These photos and others are on the Arts Integration in the School District of Palm Beach County website, and I've given you this website here so that you might go to it and find some additional photos that would be useful to you. Now I'm sharing with you work done by Susan Rossoff in our work with the Poinciana Elementary School in Palm Beach County. So Susan, would you please talk to us about this experience that we're having here with a 4th grade student using the read the picture strategy? Susan?
Well, we looked at a wonderful still life by Janet Fish, and when we started, the responses were very limited. You can see it is almost like a listing of the things that they saw, and there isn't much commentary on it, and it's not very rounded out. After we had worked on talking about the picture and finding all the elements and mood and what Janet Fish might be accomplishing, in the next slide you'll see the difference in what the student response is. And I don't know if you can change it, but all of a sudden it's a paragraph. There are so many more descriptive words here. The thought is much more complete, and so this translated to student writing as well. So having practice in talking about the picture in a safe way where you see what's happening and ask what more is happening and ask for students to substantiate their answers and give concrete evidence of what they're seeing, it helps them hone their thinking and become much more aware of their language. So
yes,
if you can compare the differences in what happened, you'll see the listing of the things that's there and then the full-blown thought, the description that is so much richer.
Thank you, Susan. I think this is a great example of the strategy and how it impacts the way that the students are expressing themselves and really able to show more of what they are learning. And so this kind of comparison of what are they doing before instruction, and then how has their response changed through instruction, is really an example of a piece that can be used to advocate the work that you're doing. So thank you for sharing that with us, Susan. Let's go on and think about yourself again. What matters to you? That's the question we were looking at earlier. And how do you link what matters to you to the big picture of arts education? And we're looking at the idea of helping to build public awareness for the importance of arts education and for what arts integration can do. And so how does what you do as one individual teaching artist or teacher, how does what you do link into this big picture and the big goals that we have ahead? I'm hoping that you can see my screen at this point. Can you? Anyone?
Yes, your screen is showing, Mary. It's changing.
See my screen?
Yes, your screen is showing, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're thinking about building a case for arts education and arts integration. But what evidence is best? We know that there are a lot of things that we could do, and I've just shared a few examples with you. But Tom, let's hear from you. What matters as we build this case? What is it that's important? What evidence is going to be the best?
I'm trying to unmute him and not having luck, so we may have a problem with that link, with that connection.
Well, let's start. Maybe Susan Rossoff, you could start this conversation for us about the evidence of what's best in building the case.
Well, the example that I gave you about the Janet Fish comparison of language is equivalent of a pre-test and a post-test, for example. So you're really documenting the differences in the learning that took place. But I think that there are a simple, when I worked in a museum, we would ask the students before they left, tell us one thing that you learned today. And so they could give input right away. You would see what they learned, and we had some proof that there were connections that were being made. So not only did the teacher understand what was learned, the museum staff did it as well. But I think that there are also a lot of things that you can do with video performance, particularly with music and with dance. You can demonstrate drawing as well, certainly with video or still pictures, see the processes that goes along, so that you can demonstrate concepts, get the feedback that there is an understanding of those concepts, and that they know and can solve the problem that you have given them.
Unmuted.
Good, thank you, Susan. And so what you're really talking
Hello?
about is informal assessments that can be ongoing with the work that you're doing. I think Tom is back online with us, and so Tom, how about it? What evidence is best in building this case?
Okay, well, let me back up, especially for teaching artists. I think it's very important to make the point that planning is a key to building this evidence. And so when, you know, long gone are the days that when we have someone come into the classroom and do a prepackaged program where you know the one person does one thing and keeps repeating it at different schools, because the case has to be built at each school and with each culture of each school, and also by using the data to drive instruction. And that's what we do a lot now, is we look at the diagnostic test, we look at the data, we see what strategies need to be strengthened in the classroom and what the learning styles are of the students, so that we build on those our strategies for those different learners. And that's where we build our case. And we build it data up, and that once those test scores and start seeing improvement, that's what builds the case for us.
You, Tom. And so part of what Tom is talking about is this data that also can help us. And so all of us need to have some idea of the big picture. We need to know what the big picture data is talking about. And so, Tom, I'd like you to talk with us a little bit about this study from the National Educational Longitudinal Study published by the US DOE. So, Tom?
This was a 10-year study, and this is just one of the many pieces of information that DOE furnished to us. It was a 10-year study, over 25,000 secondary students. And as you can see, just this one slide, we're talking about low socioeconomic students and math proficiency. And what you're able to see is both in 8th grade and in 12th grade, those students that studied music, and there's a whole explanation of how many semesters and so forth, but those that studied music on a regular basis made tremendous strides in their math scores, as opposed to those students that did not study any music. That's just a simple, quick explanation of the slide. And the thing is, too, that we, I think they're all aware there's probably 30 years of this kind of data out there, and this data that I don't think that people are aware of, and so we need to be able to use these pieces of information to be able to drive our instruction and to show that what we're doing is substantial.
Good. Thank you, Tom. And so just being armed with some of this national information is going to be useful. Well, we've also got some Florida information from the Florida cohort of 12th grade students. It's back in 2008, but it still holds true today. Tom, would you like to tell us a little bit about this data?
Yes. This information was actually requested by Senator Wise from Jacksonville, and he requested it from DOE to look at the 12th grade cohort of all students across Florida, the graduating class of 2008. And there's a lot of good information in this report, and it's available on the FMEA website. I think we have a link on the FAAE website. But this information shows that the more credits, in other words, the more semesters that a student studies in the arts, and this is broken down by dance, drama, visual arts, and music, the more credits that they study, semesters that they study in the arts, shows that their learning goes up. And this is a study that cuts across all socioeconomic groups, and it really drives home the importance of what the arts do. Another thing that I want to point out is, and I don't know that you can see it on this chart, but this is an animated chart that spins, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to see here. But what you see is that a student taking one half credit doesn't really make that much difference. It makes a little difference, but where you really get your bang for the buck is when you get to 3 and 4 credits. And that's the substantial difference of students studying the arts compared to those that do not study the arts, and how their academic scores can go up. And this particular slide is their cumulative GPA.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And now looking at another slide from this cohort group and the SAT verbal scores, again, it's the same picture. The more arts that students have, the greater the impact is. And when we know this and use these data, it really can help us to build our case. And so as we go on to the percentage of students failing to graduate with their cohort, let's take a look at what the impact of that is on students' graduation rate. Pretty impressive, isn't it?
And this particular slide is one that the school superintendent will really pay attention to. This it's not up yet, is it?
Yes, it is. It is up.
Okay.
No, it's coming.
Okay.
Okay.
But this particular slide shows that the students, the more arts the student takes, the more apt they are to graduate with their cohort. In other words, this is a really, really important slide as far as graduation rate. So you have to look at this slide in our slide. Is students. So in other words, students with 4 or more arts are more likely to not, in other words, 4 or more arts are more likely to graduate with their cohort as compared to those students with no arts. And we're talking almost 30%. You have to kind of reverse the slide.
Thank you, Tom. We know that this is a critical concept and one that really plays with the people who are making decisions about what happens in our schools and in our communities. Even though we are armed with this national and state data, we know that solutions are local and that people want to hear about how they measure up in their own community, their own school. We need to know and share that big picture, but we need to take those pieces and relate it to the work that we're doing locally. So think about it. How successful are you in addressing whatever those local issues are? And in order to find out what those local issues are, it takes communication, particularly listening to people that are in the know, whether it be the teacher or the head of the Boys and Girls Club that you're working for, that listening to what they identify as their target areas of concern is really critical to making the work that you do feed into becoming part of the solution to whatever the issue is. And so we're going to look just a little bit at a couple of the local results, and this is from the Palm Beach County pilot study of arts integration that was done a couple of years ago. Is the slide available for everyone to see?
Yes, it's here.
Okay, so Tom, go ahead and talk to us a little about this.
This was a 4-year project that's locally funded by a foundation and with matching funds that we had leveraged from different organizations. Mary was a part of this along with Dr. Tim Brophy from the University of Florida as our evaluator. And there's 3 schools in the project, and all 3 schools during the period of time met AYP. And the interesting fact about Palmetto is when we began the project, it was 87% ELL, in other words, 87% Spanish-speaking kids. And actually, during the project, that number grew to 92%. But at the same time, as the ELL population was growing, the amazing thing was that the reading scores went up, and so did the math scores. And so this is just a perfect example of what the integrated process does. And what we found through this process is, especially for ELL students, the art strategies are perfect for the non-linguistic learning that takes place in the classroom. This is another
project.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, this is Egret Lake, which is another in the project. Of course, it met AYP also during this time. It has a different socioeconomic makeup, a smaller ELL population, but it has a 80 to 83% free and reduced meals population. And as you can see, the same kind of effect happened. The reading scores went up and the math scores went up. The free and reduced lunch population went up. Another point I'd like to make on this school is during the time that it did make AYP our project, it also won the National Title I School of the Year Award for closing the achievement gap.
And so that was a pretty significant development. Now, looking at some more of the data, Tom, I'm not going to take time for us to really look at this in depth, but you can see that the bottom line here is in their FCAT math scores, which we know is where it's at for a lot of, particularly our school administrators and those out in the community. In pilot schools, the mean gain was 369 points, which is huge, and in comparison schools during the same period of time, the score was 285. So you can see that those involved in the arts integration schools were achieving to a higher level. Same kind of results with the 4th and 5th graders, although not quite as dramatic as those that occurred in the 3rd grade. And the same kind of achievement gains were taking place in reading. And again, we see significant gains at the 3rd grade and quite impressive gains at the 4th and 5th grade. But we started out by saying we're going to start with the end in mind, and we're going to think about why we're providing that experience and what we hope to accomplish. But we've got to think about how we know we succeeded. And so we need to be thinking about the end game. What will success look like? And that is a key element of using what those end results are in order to advocate for what we're trying to achieve. And so as we continue, we want to think about the collective impact of our work. You as a teaching artist going into a classroom are most likely providing a rather short-term experience. And so the question is how to link that short-term experience to the long-term goals in order to be part of the big solution, not simply have a great small experience, but rather to look at being part of that big solution. And the impact might be curricular, it might be institutional, what's a school goal or an organizational goal, or it might be societal. We're going to save the planet. So thinking about how can your residency be part of that collective. The results that you get become the advocacy tools and help to contribute to that collective impact. But we're going to ask Susan and Tom to talk with us about putting it all out there and building public awareness. How do these teaching artists or teachers, how do they determine what they should share? And so, Tom, would you like to start on that for us?
Well, I think... Go ahead.
Susan, go ahead.
Well, I used to try and put together what I called a white paper, which sounds awfully governmental, but really what it is to collect testimonies from teachers and students, any kind of scores, any proof of the impact that you had during the time that you were there, and then share those with parents who are very powerful and in advocating arts, and principals and other teachers on the team, and further if you can or you have access to it. But certainly also have an elevator speech ready. Have that, 30 to 50 seconds to say what the impact is that you're doing. Very clearly, definitively, what happened academically. Not so much what happened in the arts, but what did they gain? Use Sunshine State standard language. Use the academic language, not so much arts language. It makes a big difference because then people understand that the academics are being impacted, not just a nice thing to do.
Am I on?
Yep, you are.
Okay, I'm on. Okay, I second what Susan said. You've got to collect that information, whether these data are, whether it's in showing test scores or whether it's telling those anecdotal stories. But the one thing that's so important that Susan said is that we have to frame it in the correct vocabulary. The uphill struggle that we face as artists is not being taken seriously, and that in the larger world sometimes we're considered fluff. And so what we have to do is we have to frame the argument with a different vocabulary. We have to use these data to our advantage, and we have to use a different vocabulary when we're sharing, so that when we're talking to parents, we have to keep it very simple but very to the point, using bullets. When we're talking to politicians, we have to frame it in the terms that they understand. So you have to be, just like any performer, you have to be aware of your audience. And we can't necessarily frame it in artistic terms a lot of the times doing this work. We have to learn some of the educational jargon, and we have to use some of the research jargon. And of course, the pieces that we showed today were a little bit more in depth as far as looking at the statistics. But if there's a way of making that simpler and simplifying it and breaking it down into very simplistic terms, that's the way we share it and we share our story. And then also, it's always important to share those anecdotal stories about the student that was the troublemaker and the one that would have never graduated. And we all have those stories of how important the arts were and how we got children engaged in the classroom and their grades went up and all of those things. Those are important stories to share too. But as Susan said also, that elevator speech is so important to know when you have 30 seconds to really get the story out, know what you're going to say.
And Tom, you had a great story about a culminating activity and how that became powerful too.
Okay, remind me which one.
It was at a violin, at a music concert, and the parents got involved. What would it be like to play the violin? What do you have to go through? What steps are required to play? I mean, then they really understood also some of the difficulty and the challenges.
Yeah, exactly. And that was missed at our county string festival. And one of the questions I posed to a standing room only audience was, have you picked up your child's violin? Have you tried to think about all the things that you have to think about when you actually play an instrument, and the thought processes, the counting, the rhythm, the note reading, all the self-analyzation skills, and all of the different combinations of skills that go together just for that student to play that violin. And it kind of hits home when you frame it that way to the parents.
But you had to make that opportunity. You didn't just give the performance. You engaged in some discussion to highlight what learning was happening, which I think is so important.
Exactly, and I think any time that we have parents or any group, any audience, we have to make that connection, because the thing that has become more obvious to me is when I first started doing this work, I just assumed everybody thought it was as important as I did. And what you have to realize is people they cannot connect the dots. And so that's part of our job, is connecting the dots for them.
Telling them what happened is important.
Absolutely.
They don't see it without our help sometimes.
Absolutely. And we need to think about who the audience is and be message specific when we're giving our information. So a parent wants their child to be stimulated, they want their child to learn, an administrator wants his school to get an A grade. People have different motivations, and we need to tailor our message to those particular audiences that are important to us. And every audience is important. Now, I'd like to take time for questions, but I know that we are out of time, and so I hope that you will email questions to me, and we'll be able to communicate with you in that way about those those questions that you might have. We had great guests today, John Letelier from the Florida Department of Education, Susan Rossoff, Museum and Arts Integration Consultant here in Orlando, and Tom Pearson, the Administrator for the Fine Arts of the Palm Beach County School District. I know that if we could, everybody would join me in a big round of applause for all of you. Thank you so much for being with us. And now we have coming up our webinar 5, and it is entitled Program Delivery and Assessment, and it will be on Tuesday the 22nd of May from 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time. And we have again with us wonderful speakers. Marion Winters is the Executive Director of VSA Florida, and Judy Levine is an outstanding teaching artist in Sarasota, and she works with the Sarasota Arts and Cultural Alliance in training teaching artists as well. And Scott Evans is the Fine Arts Director for the Orange County Public Schools. They'll be with us on Webinar 5, and we certainly hope that you will be with us on Webinar 5 as well. Now, we've got a deadline coming up on May 1st. Best Practices in Arts Integration, the compendium for Florida for this year is due on May 1st. We hope that you will share your programs with us. I will be happy to help you in any way as you are preparing your materials. If you have questions, if you need some help, I will be happy to give that help to you. So please don't hesitate to be in touch with me for that purpose, or any other purpose, as a matter of fact. Join us for the great Digital Media Festival that we have coming up on Saturday the 12th of May at University of Florida Digital Worlds Institute, and also for the FAAE Leadership Summit that will be taking place in Tampa this June. Thank you all for being with us this afternoon, and thank you to the Florida Division of Cultural Affairs and to the Florida Department of Education in collaboration with FAAE for sponsoring today's webinar. Have a great evening, everyone.